Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of Booze and Art. Today we will be talking about Maryland-style rye whiskey and this painting, which is called The Alchemy of God. Yeah, light topic. So we're going to go back in time to one of my older paintings and kind of see how it's kind of come from there. But first we're going to talk about whiskey. Hi, John. And okay, Leopold Bros. Leopold Bros is a really amazing distillery. They're from Denver, Colorado. So they're a small distillery, but they make a bazillion different products. They make a vodka, several gins, a bunch of different whiskeys. They make liqueurs, they make Fernet, they make absinthe, and probably something else that I'm forgetting. But all of them are amazingly delicious, and I highly recommend if you see the label, you should try whatever it is you see of it, because it's all good. So today we're going to be sampling. Yay! I love your unicorn heart too. We're going to be sampling a Maryland-style whiskey. So pre-Prohibition rye whiskey specifically had two separate styles. One was Pennsylvania style, also sometimes called the Monongahela style, which is a river in PA. That was always more full-bodied, much more spicy and very oaky, so full on. And then there was a Maryland style. Maryland style is totally the opposite. So it's more fruity, more softer, not as robust in that kind of way, but complex in its own way, but just a much lighter style. So that's what we've got right here. This is a Maryland style rye. And rye whiskey, okay, so I'll talk about whiskey. But first I'm going to take a sip of whiskey, and then I'll talk more about whiskey. So as a Maryland-style rye, this is definitely very floral. I get like geraniums on the nose, and kind of a very nice like vanilla butterscotch from the oak. Because of course, like the wood has lanolins in it, which is something that it's in the wood itself, and the whiskey reacts to it. And there's a specific type of lanolin called vanillin, which sounds like vanilla, which is why whiskey tastes like vanilla, because it's literally, well, American whiskey tastes like vanilla because it's a part of the wood in American oak actually has a vanilla type flavor when mixed with the esters and the oils of alcohol. So there's the vanilla. Yeah, I get a little marshmallow on that. Flavor-wise, I get a nice kind of a roundness from the char of the oak, but it has kind of like a chocolatey, like a dark chocolate walnut flavor to it as well, almost like a baked stone fruit, and you know, like you put a peach in the oven and bake it. It's super good because it caramelizes, so you get that kind of nice like caramelized flavor. Anyway, super good. So Maryland style rye whiskey. So whiskey is kind of, because oftentimes I have people being like, oh, what's your favorite type of whiskey? Or no, that's like, oh, do you like whiskey? Yeah, I like bourbon. Bourbon's awesome. But a lot of people only know that bourbon is a thing, and they kind of think that bourbon is like some sort of category and whiskey is something else. And scotch is something else that no one really understands. But whiskey is kind of the big overall header. So there's whiskey, and bourbon is a type of whiskey. Sam, seriously. Bourbon is a type of whiskey. Thanks, Eric. I try to be educational as much as possible. Sammy! And Sam wants to talk right now, apparently. So the peeping in the background is my bird. So whiskey is a type, then there's bourbon is a type, rye is a type, scotch is a type. Anywhere in the world you can make Bourbon is not a source of origin. Rye is not a source of origin. They're American styled whiskeys, but you can make them anywhere if you just follow the rules. So, Scotch is a origin, so you can only make Scotch in Scotland, but you can make Scotch type whiskey anywhere in the world, and people do. So Japanese whiskey kind of comes from like the Scottish origins of how to make whiskey. There is amazing whiskey in New Zealand. They kind of tip their hat towards a Scotch style, but do it very much in their own way. So there's kind of this wonderful tradition of kind of this global nod to Scotch. Oh my goodness, he is really peeping. Okay. His nickname is Mr. Peepers for a good reason. So rye whiskey is from rye grain. So rye grain, of course, if you think of rye bread, is rye, right? So it looks like a kind of like a longish rice kernel, and that's what rye looks like. And so you mill it, turn it into flour, mash it, add water to it, yeast to it, ferments it, and then you distill it. So to be called rye, it has to be 51% rye in a mash bill. A mash bill is just basically a fancy name for a whiskey recipe. So to be bourbon, it has to be 51% bourbon. To be rye, 51% rye. You get the picture. You can add anything else to it under the sun, more or less. And but to be called that, it has to be 51%. So 51% rye. Rye has been made in America for oodles and oodles and oodles of years. It's kind of what people consider to be the pre-prohibition whiskey. And it's recently making a giant comeback. So you can see ryes from all over the country being made in very unique styles, very unique mash bills. This one is really delicious. Leopold Bros malts their own barley. Malting is a super exciting topic. Malting, you've heard of like single malts, right? So malting basically means that you get the little grain. So in this case, it's a barley. So you get little barley grain, and you kind of start to sprout it. So just like you sprout it, you put it in water, and then it's like, oh, we're getting ready to grow. And so inside that little grain, it's like making all the sugars and doing all the stuff to like get ready to sprout, right? Except then you like mercilessly destroy it. And so you kill it right at this very particular moment where it's like almost ready to sprout, but you chop it off at the bit right there. So inside that grain, you've just kind of started this chain reaction of extra carbohydrates, which make sugar. So you're like the grain kind of makes its own food for the sprouting to happen, which is kind of why people who eat sprouted everything's like think sprouting is amazing, because you just kind of like are eating this like life force of the grain. But by killing it right there, you're adding extra sugar to the grain. So when you're fermenting your spirit, all of the little yeasts, these are yeasts eating the carbohydrate chains, like Pac-Man, have more to eat. So when they poop, because alcohol is basically yeast poop, they poop out more alcohol than if they didn't have as much sugar to eat. So it's really awesome. So basically, cheers to yeast poop. I'll drink to that. Okay, so rye, Maryland style rye, freaking delicious. And it's Leopold Brothers from Denver, Colorado. They make amazing liqueurs, and their absinthe is pretty damn good too. All right, moving right along. Cheers to yeast poop. The Alchemy of God. Okay, so I have to pick the phone up and actually, because this is like a long painting, so we're gonna kind of go this way. I painted this painting back in, 2005 or 6? 2000, let's say 2006. Makes it seem not as old that way. Which is still like 10 years ago. Oh my God, time flies. Okay, 10 years ago. 10 years ago I was painting this painting. What is it? All right, so this figure behind me is the history of God. So he appears in several, or she, really, it's both. He appears in several of my paintings. And where does she come from? He come from. I'll just kind of get out of the way and let you stare at that for a second while I'm talking. So the history of God is An image that came to me when I was having a really severe migraine. I was reading the Bible, actually, and because, why not? And my favorite part of the Bible is Ezekiel, because he's crazy and, he's awesome. He's like a shaman, and he has visions, and he has these amazing visions about angels and these crazy, mechanical creatures in the sky, right? I mean, ancient aliens, what? But, so could it be that ancient aliens, no. So I had a really bad migraine, and I had this vision of this being that was kind of everything God has ever been to humans in the history of time. Light topics. So, God has always been represented kind of as multiple natured, right? So the three faces of God, even Christianity has the Son, the Father, and the Holy Ghost, right? Three. Brahma, I believe, has three faces. There's kind of this triple aspect of the faces of God that always kind of is the inner, the outer, and the other in a way. It can always be talked about that way. So in this image, there you go. So there's three faces there. Those three faces are made up of Toltec, Olmec, Aztec, and Inca art. So all of those are not, did I say it in order? I think it's actually Olmec, Toltec, Aztec, Inca. So they're kind of in order of from ancient to modern, more contemporary, not modern, but more contemporary as far as that goes. So there's some super ancient imagery in there as well as some, as those cultures kind of bled and fed into each other and inspired each other in those faces. That's what we have here. So around his neck is the zodiac. She is both female and male. Because God has always been represented as one or the other, sometimes, often, both. There's plenty of examples where God is hermaphroditic, because that's kind of the perfect, we'll talk about that later because I'm working on a painting about that, but the perfect union of both elements is a male and female entity that is the same thing. So there's a whole tradition and many traditions about that. So of course it has to be both male and female. Not to mention, goddesses have been the ruling deity, as have gods. So the snakes and birds in the arms. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 arms. I can't remember if I did that on accident or not, but there's 13 arms. So 13 is a very specific number. I'm pretty positive I did that on purpose, but sometimes I forget. 13 is a magic number. It's not a bad number. It's again, it's a magic number, so that's why I put 13. But it's birds and snakes. Birds and snakes have always been represented as a goddess. It's birds because they communicate with the heavens, are messengers. Oh, and V says hi right at that moment. She's so good. Because they're messengers to the heavens, and between us as mortals on the earth, they can reach the skies. And snakes, because snakes shed their skin, so they are a symbol of the eternal return, and that is that life both dies and is reborn in a cyclical process. So they are an ever-renewing entity, just like the moon, just like a bunch of other things. So it has goat hooves. Because of Satan and many other reasons. Satan is actually, and the goat is actually a goddess image. We'll talk about that later as well, but just know that, put that in the back burner somewhere. And then there's Poseidon's horses, so I kind of reference Greek mythology and Roman mythology there. And then this is this tale of a dragon, so a Chinese dragon, so Eastern mythology and religion and all that kind of good stuff. And within the body of the history of God is the known universe. So that's all of the planets and the galaxies and all that stuff, because the known universe has always been linked with God from kind of the moment we were able to look up into the sky and see it. So Yeah, so that's the history of God. So that's the figure, and well, I can. There's several other paintings that it appears in that I have sold over the years. So this is the only one I have left, but it will probably start making a comeback in some of my newer work because it's one of my favorite guys. Like I love talking about the history of God. So in this particular image, because it's called the Alchemy of God, why? I'm gonna just drink more whiskey. Okay. Here, let me get so it's not super glary. Okay. So this is the Alchemy of God. So the history of God lives in this like little realm, right? So these really amazing weird shapes are called calabi-yau shapes. They are 6-dimensional shapes that are in string theory, or M theory rather. M is for mother, major, whatever, no one really knows, but it's called M theory. And M theory is basically that elements are made up of strings, like pretty much everything is made up of a string, and there's the vibration of that string determines what the element is, and those string vibrations make up reality. So, but those strings are bent around these multiple dimensional shapes in order to fit into the 11 dimensions that string theory M theory proposes. So calabi-yau shapes, there's like a bazillion different versions of them. So there's like people like working on which one specifically is. So you can imagine these calabi-yau shapes like on every single point of our reality. So just like go there for a second. So everything is in points. And there's these little 6-dimensional crazy little guys like wrapped up on that single point. So every time there's a string vibrating, it's got to go through these like 6 dimensions to make our reality possible in the other several dimensions that we can actually like kind of comprehend. Awesome. So on that note, there's these fiddleheads in the painting. There's one up there, here, and there. So the fiddleheads, there's this absolutely amazing alchemical drawing from like the 1600s that is Sam, God, that is the hand of God kind of tuning a fiddlehead, and this fiddle, like the neck of the fiddle goes down. And I wish I would have thought to get a picture of it. I have it in a book somewhere. Anyway, I'll post it in the comments. But there's like as the fiddle goes down, it goes through like spirit, the earth, heaven, all this stuff. It goes down. So basically, like God is like tuning like the strings to make reality vibrate in the right way. And I was like, that's amazing, because that's basically like what string theory says. Okay, seriously, Sam. Okay, this is Sam. This is who's making all that noise right now. Yep, there you go. Now you know. Like, what the hell is that annoying peeping? That's Sam. Anyway, so the hand of God is like tuning these strings and making the vibrations fall into the perfect harmony so that reality comes through. I mean, it's just so beautiful, right? So that's why there's these fiddleheads doing these strings. So, okay, we got those 2 elements down. Okay, so calabi-yau shapes, fiddleheads for the string. All right, now the heart center of the history of God is point 0. And out of that heart center, there are concentric circles. So if you notice, there's concentric circles like written all the way out to the edge of the painting, right? So 0 is just that. It's 0. I never peeped this much when I do this. It's so silly. So 0 is the heart center, right? Because that's where it is. And so as it's going out, and here, I'm going to zoom in. I think you can see it. Okay. You can see that there are things written in these lines. This is like just from, I started in the first concentric circle, just numbers, and then different numbers from different traditions. So writing them out in different ways. And then I started with super simple theorems, like math theorems, like velocity, like force, like speed, you know, all this stuff, like all that. And then I have the elements, so all of the elements. And then as it gets like further and further out, I have more and more detailed like quantum mechanics theorems written in here. So I was trying to, as we get more and more complex out of this kind of ripple effect from the heart center, things get more complex, but they're really simple right at zero, right? So right at zero, and then this kind of blue, here, so I have to kind of get out here, right? So do you see how there's like that blue kind of like gooey, like it's blue here and then it's not so blue, like it kind of, like there's this line here that separates this part of it to this part of it. So that's kind of the film that separates spirit from matter, right? So if the history of God is spirit, and that's always how we've looked at the universe, is through this lens of the divine, because it is. We've always looked at the stars and thought that some creature or some being bigger than us made that thing happen. And we've never, you know, like science is basically trying to explain that, which is amazing. But they don't explain the same thing. Like the same, you know, like there's beauty and a lot of like awe and wonder in a calabi-yau shape or in M theory, but it's not spirit. So spirit is something else, you know. Spirit is feeling, it's emotion, it's something that's a lot more intangible, and matter starts to try to define the tangible. So I wanted to separate the two because even though they can live in the same place, they're not talking about the same thing. And that's okay. They don't have to talk about the same thing in order for both of them to exist. So that's what this painting is about. It's the alchemy of God, because alchemy is both about matter and spirit, and that's how, you know, like those two things were trying to be fused and trying to like make it work, and alchemy is all about making those things kind of talk to each other. So this is making the history of God and the latest scientific discovery talk to each other in a way that doesn't overshadow or minimize either one. Boom. All right, so that's what that's about. Yeah, so that's on my website. It's also on my Facebook artist page. So if you haven't yet, please, I have a call to action, so everybody needs to do this. Please like my Facebook artist page. This is my Instagram and this is my Facebook artist page. So it's just Christina Lazar Artist, or at artist Christina Lazar, like just look it up. And then click like, because I have prints available there. I have all sorts of fun content that I don't post on my regular personal site. It is backwards, I know, sorry. I realize that. So just look at artist Christina Lazar, and that's my art Facebook page. And please click like. Awesome. And thank you very much for tuning in. Thanks, John. Yeah, I got really into, like, I love quantum mechanics. Like, I love physics and cosmology and all that good stuff. And, like, just geeking out on that shit is just, like, my favorite thing to do. So a lot of my art for a while was all about that stuff. And this is actually one of the only paintings I have left from that time period, which is kind of cool. So, but yeah, Alchemy of God, Leopold Bros, amazing Maryland style whiskey, and like my artist page, and tune in next Sunday, for another episode of Booze and Art. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys later. Bye. How do I make it stop? Okay, finish. Bye.